maintaining the joy of programming with help from Bob Ross. What does that mean? We're going to get into it. This is the rough journey that you and I are going to go on. First, we're going to introduce Bob. I know that Bob is like a very large cultural figure within American culture, but internationally, some people may not know him. Then we're going to go through some of the lessons that or I guess I have learned from the joy of painting, including how long it takes to do a painting. What are the tools? What are some of the tips and tricks of like making a good painting? And then I imagine by the end of it, the old clock on the wall will be telling me that it's time to go. And everybody will be panicking because maybe I went too long. I can talk about Bob Ross for hours, days, years. And here he is. This is Bob. That's Bob's arm, I guess. Bob Ross is an American painter who was the host of The Joy of Painting that ran for a little over 10 years, 1983 to 1994. In that time, The Joy of Painting had over 400 episodes. I think it's actually 409 or something. And he became known for his sort of like calm demeanor, kind attitude. He's a really good guy. And you could just put him on. A lot of people like to listen to him to fall asleep. But he talks very low, and he talks about it's okay to make mistakes. Everything is okay. He made painting approachable. So typically you see a painting in a museum, you go, wow, that's got to take a lot of skill. And Bob is here to say, no, no. In fact, if you do painting the way that Bob will teach you can crank out a painting in like a small amount of time, and it's easy. He's here to teach you the method and then let you go and do your own thing. And he also became a large part of pop culture as a result, right? Like sort of an interesting guy in a number of respects. This is one of his signature things on the left is he'd do a very nice landscape, and then he slams a big tree in the front of it. And I know what you're saying. Bob messed up this time. Well, maybe. And he was on the Phil Donahue show at one point. I don't really know what that means. I'm told it's kind of a big deal. And I think it's kind of like going on Ellen if it was like 2011. So like that's the level of pop culture that we're talking about. But as time goes on, basically everyone's notoriety sort of starts to fall off. And then October of 2015 happens, and the Bob Ross channel goes live on Twitch. It's a 24-hour marathon for a month, 24 hours a day. Every episode of The Joy of Painting is streaming for free on twitch.tv with a live chat that everyone can interact with. And it was one of those internet cultural zeitgeist things where like, you're not really quite sure why a culture popped up around it, but it did, and it did in a really big way. So you could see clips here. People are flooding the chat with Bob Ross emotes. It had its own jokes. People were like, Bob never reads chat. And he, what's he going to do today? You think we're going to get a mountain in this one? You think maybe a stream? I don't know. And that whole month hit me at just the right time. You ever have like a song that you listen to and you're like, oh, wow, like this is like emblematic of what I'm going through right now? Bob Ross hit me at exactly the right time in my career. I was a young web developer. I had been doing it for 2 years, and I had maybe went a little too hard into some projects that I was working on, and was starting to experience sort of the beginnings of burnout. And my whole day just switched overnight. I started watching Bob, and I said, this is something that I like. So Bob Ross was on all day at work on a second monitor, just listen to him painting. When I came home, I would turn Bob Ross on, turn the lights off, and take a nap. I would wake up, I'd turn Bob Ross on my computer. I would play games, do projects, whatever. Like I was in. So much so that that Christmas I got a Bob Ross paint set, and by the time the next Bob Ross marathon came around, I'd already done over a dozen oil paintings. And yeah, this is still like they continue to do this marathon every year. In fact, the first one was to launch Twitch Creative, which is what the programming category is under. That's why we can all stream programming on Twitch, which is pretty sick, I think. So after I'd started doing some oil painting, that's my first oil painting. This is a little bit like I wrote I wrote tic-tac-toe in high school. Here's my code for it. But here's my first painting. This is actually the mountains, or it's called Mountain Summit. This is from season 13, episode 10. And you'll see this as like a lot of people's first painting with the Bob Ross method, because this comes bundled in a DVD with your Bob Ross kit. So you'll see this a lot. And, for a first painting, it's not too bad, right? There's a mountain. You could tell there's trees. You could tell there's water and a sky with it's a big cloud. If you take a look on the right, you see what should be bushes, but is just kind of a green blob. For definitely first painting. We can only go upward from here. So like the first lesson here is this painting took me 3 hours, right? It took Bob 30 minutes. Bob started with nothing in almost every episode and finished with a painting at the end of that episode. There were no part twos. There was no to be continueds. It was start with a painting, end with a painting. And with his technique, you could crank these things out pretty quickly. I got to the point where I could, using this technique alone, I could do a painting in about an hour. And that just means that like each painting is so quick that if it fails, you could kind of just do another one, right? If you say like, I'm going to paint tonight, and you spend an hour and a half making a painting and you go, that didn't quite turn out how I wanted. I should have put this over there. You can just put that painting down, pick up a new painting and do another one, right? It's you've still got a couple of hours, and then you can watch Jimmy Fallon or whatever it is you do before you go to bed. And yeah, it's as a result, Bob also shows you that with this technique, you can just scrape it off and do it again as well. Here he is in episode 13 from season 11. It's titled Happy Accident. He starts off in the middle of a painting. You're like, Bob, what are you cheating on me right now? And he says, no, not happy with the way this is going. So I'm just going to scrape this paint off, do a whole nother painting. Miraculous. So what can we take from that, right? Small projects, small commitments. New projects are really easy to start whenever your commitments are low. The smaller the scope of a project, the more opportunities you have to do it. So, you wouldn't pull out like 1,000-piece puzzle like this and expect to do it in one shot, right? Most of the time, you pull out the puzzle, you do it for a half hour, you do it for an hour, and then you sit down, you're like, well, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go do dinner. You come back to it every so often. And that's because the commitment for starting up a puzzle is pretty low. It's the same thing with these paintings that he's doing, right? Like if you can jam out a painting in an hour, there's not really an incentive for you to not do it. And so all of that has to do with having a narrow scope. If you know that your time commitment for a project is only going to be a few hours, it's only going to be, X amount of days, and it's really easy to put down and pick back up, you can start those projects really easily. And this also means that you could fit in multiple small sessions. For me, I rarely watch movies at home, but I watch like 3 hours of YouTube a day. And it's just because I'm like, well, I could watch this 20-minute One Piece lore YouTube video, right? That's fine. And then all of a sudden, 3 hours later, here I am watching a guy clear out some drains and culverts. And oops, I could have totally watched actually that whole movie. But it's because of like the smaller commitments of each of these videos, right? And no project is too dumb to work on either. Because the commitment is small, because the project is small, it's really easy to not feel like you're wasting your time. So Bob is always very good to point out, hey, if you're not good at mountains, make a whole painting with just mountains, right? If nobody sees it, it doesn't really matter. It takes, an hour to do a painting like that. So get better at mountains, only take you like an hour. If your bushes are bad, paint a whole kingdom of bushes, right? Just go for it. Because the commitment and the time are low, right? It's easy to get up in there. So how did I apply this to my personal life? I grew up in a small town, a small farming community. Our nearest mall is half an hour away. And my friend that I grew up with said, oh, we're getting a cheesecake factory at the mall. He'd never been, never even heard of it. And he said, well, I mean, some of these businesses, they just like to put stuff in their names. How many cheesecakes do they have? And I opened up the cheesecake menu. And my immediate gut feeling, and this can tell you that I'm a programmer, is I could spend 20 seconds counting all these cheesecakes, or or I could write a bot to do it for me, and then it can count the cheesecakes forever. Um, and so that's how the Cheesecake Factory bot was born. I decided I want to know when these fire new cheesecakes are dropping. And I sat down and just wrote a solution. It took about 3 hours. And I got to the point, the project was done. I was able to like successfully grab the menu. And I found a much easier way to do it that was like lower memory and it ran a lot faster. And I just said, I mean, I only spent 3 hours on this. I'll just throw it, I'll scrape it off and do it again, right? Like, so after about an hour, I had refactored the whole thing to do this new method. And the whole reason why I felt comfortable doing that is because I didn't invest like a month into doing this, right? Like, I wrote this over the course of a couple of Twitch streams. It was very low pressure. And in fact, I had so much time, I added Twitter and a menu update detection because why not, right? I can read cheesecakes. Why not read the whole menu? Why not tell you whenever a new thing shows up? It's maybe broken, and I mostly don't care, right? The most recent tweet that it had is July 6th, 2022, and it was to say that the creamy Basque cheesecake is coming. I imagine more things have come to the menu since then, but look how good that cheesecake looks. I'm just saying that it's, you know, this isn't the most important project on my plate, so like I finished it. I thought it was neat, and if I ever have the need to like really, if I have a visceral burning to get more cheesecake updates, I can go back and take a look at it. Right. Um, Here's my next painting. Well, I guess not next. This is like my fifth painting or so. But what's notable about this is my first painting that's based on no sources. So up until this point, I'd been copying Bob Ross paintings, other YouTube artists. And I decided, you know what? I think I've got a tool set that's built up enough that I can start to do what I actually want to do, which is video game paintings. I wanted to do landscapes of video game scenes. And this is a landscape from Halo. You could tell because in the background, there's a halo. Now, that's not to say it's a good halo, but it is there. There's also a little power up on the left to show, you can get that invisibility power up. But I was able to do this. And I, again, after 5 paintings, you could see my contrast is starting to get better. You could clearly see those bushes separated on the right. So I didn't have the mistake in that first painting, but still definitely a long way to go. There's a bunch of things that I would change about this, but, I was able to do this with, just a few paints, few tools, but there's endless combinations here. With Bob Ross's method, you've got these 11 colors. I would say them. I'm very tempted to say them, but I won't. They're on the screen if you want to read them. It's 2 base layer paints, right? Liquid white, liquid clear, 2 or 3 core brushes, and 1 knife. So this is everything on the screen is what you have to have in order to basically reproduce any painting that Bob Ross does. There's a couple of nice to haves that they added later, a brush to like blend clouds better and make them look nice, a filbert brush to make little small rocks and stuff a lot easier, and some like nice big fluffy round brushes to make big round bushes, but like you don't need them. You need a 2-inch brush, 1-inch brush, fan brush, palette knife, and you're done. In fact, in some episodes, you don't even use all those, right? There's one where Bob did a whole episode where he's just painting with palette knife. There was one where he did a whole painting in black and white. He said somebody came up to him and said, "Well, I don't think I can paint because I'm colorblind." And so Bob said, "Well, I'll do a painting in black and white. Doesn't matter what color you can't see. You can always make a painting that's interesting." Most of his winter stuff is just white, black, and blue, right? So with a small amount of tools, 400 plus episodes, never once repeated a painting. So what can we extract from that, right? If you have a small set of core tools that limits your decision making, that means that like there are less choices to make because you have a smaller toolbox. You say like, in this project, I need a relational database. I know how to use MySQL. That's the relational database I'm going to work with, right? And if you decide that like, learning the sort of best tool for the job is like really daunting and it feels like it's going to be time consuming, maybe it is the best tool for that job, but it's not the best tool for this project, right? So a good example of this is if you're writing some like server software, right? You want it to be like really performant. Well, people are saying Rust is like that. That's the language you got to write stuff in. but rest can be hard to learn, and rest has a bunch of advantages to it. But if you're going to take 6 months to like get good at rust and then write your good piece of software, it's probably not worth it to do that. You should just use the language that you know, and start to like slowly improve. If that's a vector you want to improve in, go for it. But the first lesson, I guess the most important lesson I learned at my first web dev job was the concept of a complexity token. So in any new project you're going into, you're allotted one complexity token. And the idea here is that for your project, once you scope it, you should only have one thing that is going to be that is going to be really complex and really, one new thing that you're going to try, one thing that's going to like exhaust your brain to think about. The rest of the stuff should be things you're familiar with. So if you decide like I need to, have this interesting piece of software that has like this database component to it, and I'm really interested in learning this new database technology, that's your complexity token. The rest of it should be tools you already know how to do. Reason being, even if it doesn't take all of your time or even the majority of your time to interact with that new thing, that's what your brain is going to be spending the most effort on. And you want that effort to go toward learning and implementing a new thing, and being able to integrate it and get these small wins under your belt with like the stuff you already know how to do, rather than juggling and context switching between like, oh, well, what if I actually did 5 things that are new? And this can be applied to other stuff as well. If you decide like, I'm really good at landscapes, but I want to learn how to do portraits, and specifically I want to learn how to do them in watercolors, 2 things that I've never done before. Don't do that. Do landscapes and watercolors, or do portraits and oils, but don't switch both. It's you'll have a much better time doing that. And the way that I implemented this on stream is, right, I wanted to have a custom bot to interact with my Twitch audience. I feel like if you program on Twitch, that's like a rite of passage. Basically, every programmer is like, the bots out there don't quite do what I want. I guess I'll write my own. I don't know why. It's just a thing we all do. But I chose a bunch of technology that I'd already used before, right? For both my front end and my back end. All of that was technology I'd used before on previous projects. And it's all things that I knew that I could get up pretty quickly. The only new thing was Twitch integration, right? So how do I interact with Twitch chat? How do I like get new like point redemptions? How do I like interact with a Twitch API? All of that was my complexity token. Twitch was my token, right? I spent that to be able to integrate with Twitch. And it only took me a few weeks to get it off the ground. And yeah, Twitch was the thing that I spent the most time inside of the documents. Like, oh, is that how that works? Oh, okay. Oh, this notification schema is weird. I didn't think about that. Okay. And yeah, it only took a few weeks. I still have it. And now if you come to my stream, you can order a coffee. I've got this like cafe motif, so you can order a coffee, and I've got like a coffee made that says hi when you show up on stream. It's sick. And that's like all of that is because I kept the scope of this low, right? I could have done this with like a game engine. I could have done this like dynamically. I made it available to the public, but like keep it small, keep it small, keep it small. This is probably my 12th painting. This is good. I was gonna say it's a good painting. It's not. Okay, it's I enjoy this painting a lot. I like this painting a lot. It's Totoro in like a sunny forest, taking a nap on a log, and it's in the shape of Totoro, which I think is nice. This is also, fun fact, my first acrylic painting. This is the first time I ever experimented with new mediums, and I think I did a pretty good job here, especially with like my bushes. You can see I've got a lot of contrast in those bushes. You could see shadows going. You could see the leaves are looking pretty nice. But you need dark in order to show light, right? The contrast in this picture is kind of nice because you can see that there are shadows and there are highlights. You need dark in order to show light is actually a quote from Bob Ross. It's a rather famous one. He said, if you have all light, you have nothing. If you have all dark, you have nothing. You need dark in order to show light. You need those bad times in order to make those good times shine. I'm waiting on the good times now. That's a rough paraphrasing of what he said. And that quote was actually shortly after his wife passed away. So, Bob has painted hundreds, thousands maybe of paintings. And contrast is a really sort of core thing that you have to know about. And you have to keep in mind. And Bob applied this lesson from his craft into his real life. and you could tell he's good at it, right? Like if you take a look at his mountain summit painting on the left and my mountain summit painting on the right, you can see Bob's got these bushes, right? Like a lot of them are the same color, but you could tell they're different. You look at mine and yeah, well, I'm not quite sure what that is. It's because he's left enough dark. He's left enough contrast and color to suggest the shape of the bush, and I uh, beat it into the earth, never to be seen again. And it's really important to have that contrast in order to have an interesting and clear image. The closer that you bring two colors, the less your eye is drawn to it, and sort of the more difficult you make it on the viewer to differentiate the two. Which is why it's important to have more accessibility stuff inside of like your talks, your front facing websites. Having a contrast makes them easier to read. You don't want people like straining their eyes to be able to like get your message across. And it's the exact same with painting. But for me, like Bob extrapolated that lesson to be, in my time in my life, things are going to be hard, but they will get better, and that makes the good times better. And it's very similar for your hobbies, right? Not just programming, but any hobby. Coding isn't always easy, and in fact, no matter how long you've been doing it, there's always going to be something you find difficult about programming. You could be a senior staff vice president, software engineer, code samurai, whatever they're putting on like job descriptions these days. You could be that, and there are still going to be things about coding you're not a fan of, or that you struggle with. And there's always more to learn. As soon as you get over a paradigm, as soon as you like wrap your head around a piece of technology, there's some new hotness coming out, right? And for me, though, the feeling of overcoming, like solving that problem and like going through the struggle of like, I just need this to work. And then, oh, it worked. That exhale is like the best feeling in the world. Second best feeling in the world. The first best feeling in the world is hearing my child laugh. So go ahead and clip this. That way I can show it to my child when he grows up. This also happens in any painting, right? So this isn't just programming, woodworking, painting, any hobby. Name one, that one too, right? Sometimes your wood warps, you've got to plane it. Sometimes in your painting, the shape you want doesn't come out right. You just got to try it again, right? But overcoming it feels so good. And in my personal life, I wanted sort of a chill website vibe, right? I wanted to listen to lo-fi music, and I wanted to have it be like immersive audio. So it would live capture the audio, do some manipulations to it to make it sound like the audio is coming out of the scene that you're watching. So from here, we're sort of in a valley looking at a town. I've got ambient noises of birds playing, wind through the trees. The audio itself has the bass sort of turned down and reverb turned up a little bit to mimic it like coming out of a boombox or a phone and bouncing off the walls. The thing is, getting this to work in Firefox and Chrome was a struggle. It was a 2-year off and on battle just to get this to work. And I cannot tell you how joyous and free I felt whenever I could successfully open up this website in both Firefox and Chrome, and it just worked. And the especially like the rewards afterward, right? Like now I can put this on the internet, so anyone can go to Lazy Day Cafe and like listen to music, and the audio just works, and it just feels so nice to be able to do that. Like especially after again 2 years. That exhale was like one of the biggest exhales of my life. But yeah, predictably, the old clock on the wall is telling me that it's about time for me to wrap up my time with you. This is my most recent painting. It's a acrylic underpainting, oil overpainting of the Chocobo Ranch from Final Fantasy VII. I sent this over to Games Done Quick, the speedrun marathon, to auction off for charity for the Present Cancer Foundation. And this has got some really nice contrast in it. It's got suggestions of objects you can't see. It's got like some interesting perspective stuff. This has nothing to do with any lesson. I just wanted to brag because I like this painting. But it's time for me to say bye. If I said Bob Ross and you tuned out of this to go watch the joy of painting, we're at about 24 minutes now. You should be done with that episode, and now you're back. Don't worry, I'll catch you up on all the stuff. The lessons learned in one hobby are applicable to others. So if you enrich yourself with hobbies that are wide and diverse and low pressure, you can learn things in those that you can apply to your full time job, to other hobbies, to being a human being in society. Um, and you shouldn't be afraid to try new things to keep your spark alive for coding. It sounds really daunting to try new stuff, but if you keep the context like in mind of like this is the thing I'm doing for fun, you keep your scope low, you keep your toolbox small, it's really possible to try new fun stuff and not have it be a chore. And it doesn't matter what your project is, silly, useful, innovative, derivative. As long as you're having fun, it's all worthwhile. If you heard my Cheesecake Factory bot and you said, you know what, I need to write a bot that tells me when the Shamrock Shake is back at McDonald's, go do it. You could go make it happen right now. And if you need some more inspiration, Bob Ross still streams on Twitch to an audience of thousands. It's off and on, but every October, that 24-hour stream comes back. And at the end of every episode, he says happy painting and God bless, which doesn't feel quite right for me. So I'll say happy programming and hashtag blessed.